The fluorescent lights buzzed, a dull, lifeless hum. It was 10:32 p.m., empty desks stretched out like tombstones in the sterile office light. I was alone, or so I thought. A prickle ran down my spine. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, like something was about to happen. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking. The sound was amplified, echoing in the stillness. Each tick of the clock seemed to reverberate through my bones. Why was I here so late? Deadline pressure. The constant need to prove myself. I glanced at the blinking cursor on my screen. Work. The only solace in this suffocating silence. But even the work couldn't distract me from the feeling that something was wrong. It felt like eyes were on me, watching, waiting. I shook my head, trying to dispel the paranoia. Just my imagination. It had to be, right?
But the silence, it lingered, heavy and oppressive, as if the very air was holding its breath.
The hairs on my arms stood on end. The air had grown cold, unnaturally so. My breath formed wispy clouds in front of me. The building's heating system was notoriously efficient. There shouldn't be a chill, especially not like this. It seeped into my bones, chilling me from the inside out. The lights flickered, once, twice, then darkness. My heart pounded against my ribs. I fumbled for my phone, the screen's dim light a pathetic beacon in the suffocating blackness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the office in an anemic yellow glow. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. Panic welled up inside me. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just an old building playing tricks. Something was deeply, terribly wrong, and I was trapped in the middle of it.
The shadows seemed to mock her, their movements deliberate and sinister, as if they had a life of their own.
A sound, faint but unmistakable. A whisper. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It came from the hallway outside my office door. A low, guttural murmur. Indecipherable words spoken in a language that chilled me to my core. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the impossible. A draft? Pipes groaning? Anything but what my gut told me was true. I held my breath, listening intently. The whispering continued, interspersed with the distinct sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, approaching. Terror tightened its grip on my throat. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. The whispering ceased. Silence descended once more, heavier, more menacing than before. I was prey, trapped in the sights of an unseen predator, and it was about to strike.
You cannot hide. I see you.
The voice was a chilling reminder that she was not alone, and whatever was out there, it was coming for her.
A cold dread settled in my stomach. Memories of whispered rumors among colleagues flooded my mind. Stories of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and a general sense of unease that permeated the office after hours. Most dismissed it as paranoia, the product of overactive imaginations fueled by late nights and looming deadlines. But one story refused to be ignored, a tale whispered in hushed tones, the story of Sarah, a junior architect who pulled an all-nighter on the 13th floor. She was never seen alive again. Her disappearance remained unsolved, a chilling mystery that cast a pall over the entire firm. Some whispered she simply snapped under the pressure, choosing to disappear. Others claimed she had stumbled upon something sinister, something lurking in the shadows of the old building, something that wanted her silenced. I always dismissed these stories. Until now.
The weight of the stories pressed down on her, the reality of her situation becoming terrifyingly clear.
I had to get out of here, now. The silence was broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. I grabbed my things, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. Panic had taken over. As I made my way to the door, something caught my eye. A file lay open on a nearby desk. Sarah's desk. Curiosity warred with terror. Against my better judgment, I approached the desk. The file contained architectural blueprints for the building, but these weren't ordinary blueprints. They were spattered with something dark and ominous. Blood. My stomach lurched. This was no ghost story. This was real. And whatever happened to Sarah was happening again. To me. My gaze fell upon a circled room number on the blood-stained blueprints. Room 1301, the 13th floor. This building didn't have a 13th floor. It was a widely known fact, a superstitious quirk of the building's original designers. There was no button for the 13th floor in the elevator, no mention of it on any floor directory. It simply didn't exist. But Sarah's blueprints suggested otherwise. And now, with every fiber of my being, I knew. This wasn't just an old building with faulty wiring and creaky pipes. This was a place of secrets. Dark, terrible secrets. And the 13th floor held the key to unlocking the horrors that lay within. The elevator lurched, throwing me off balance. It shouldn't be moving. I hadn't pressed any buttons. The doors slid open, revealing not the familiar hallway of my floor, but a long, dimly lit corridor. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a musty, oppressive odor that clung to the back of my throat. I stepped out of the elevator, my legs shaky beneath me. The hallway was lined with doors, each one slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of decaying furniture and cobweb-covered walls. It was like stepping into a forgotten time, a place untouched by the outside world for decades. At the end of the hallway, a single door stood out. It was painted a deep, blood red, and it was slightly ajar. The red door beckoned me forward, a siren song of dread and fascination. I had to know what was behind it. I had to know the truth about Sarah. As I approached the door, the whispering started again. This time it was louder, closer. It seemed to be coming from inside the room. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was small and cramped, lit by a single flickering light bulb. In the center of the room stood a single table, and upon that table lay a pile of papers. Sarah's blueprints. But something was different. They were covered in writing, frantic, scribbled handwriting. I reached for the papers, my heart pounding in my chest. As my fingers brushed against the cold, brittle paper, the writing came into focus. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized. But one word stood out, repeated over and over again in a chilling mantra. "He's coming."
A cold hand grasped my shoulder.
I spun around, my scream dying in my throat. Standing behind me, bathed in the sickly yellow light, was a figure, tall, gaunt, with eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. It smiled, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. The whispering intensified, filling my ears, my mind, until it was the only sound I could hear. Then, everything went black.
When I awoke, I was no longer in the dimly lit office. I found myself on the 13th floor, which I had been told didn't exist. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I stumbled forward, my steps echoing in the eerie silence. The whispers were gone, replaced by a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. As I moved deeper into the floor, I noticed the surroundings shifting, warping into grotesque shapes and forms. It was as if the building itself was alive and it was watching me. Suddenly, I came upon a door, ancient and foreboding, with symbols carved into its surface. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, but I knew I had to see what lay beyond. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open, and what I saw on the other side was beyond comprehension. It was a hidden world, a realm of horror and despair. Twisted figures moved in the shadows, their eyes glowing with malevolence. The floor was littered with remnants of those who had come before me, their faces frozen in eternal terror. At the center of it all stood a massive, pulsating entity, its form constantly shifting and changing. As I stood there paralyzed with fear, the entity turned its gaze upon me. Its eyes bore into my soul, and I knew then that I had uncovered a dark secret that was never meant to be revealed. The 13th floor was a gateway to another dimension, a place where nightmares became reality. The entity began to move towards me, its presence overwhelming. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Just as it was about to reach me, everything went black once more. I awoke in my office, the papers scattered around me. The whispers were gone, and the figure was nowhere to be seen. But I knew that the horror of the 13th floor was real, and that it would haunt me forever. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience in suspense, wondering what will happen next. The terror of the 13th floor still fresh in my mind, I knew I had to escape the building before it consumed me entirely. My heart raced as I gathered my thoughts and devised a plan. The elevators were out of the question. Whatever malevolent force controlled this place surely had them under its grasp. My only hope was the stairwell. I cautiously made my way to the emergency exit, every creak of the floorboard sending chills down my spine. The air was thick with an unnatural cold, and I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows. I reached the stairwell door and pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The stairwell was dimly lit, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. I began my descent, each step echoing ominously. Halfway down, I heard a noise above me, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, my footsteps growing more frantic. Suddenly the lights went out, plunging the stairwell into complete darkness. Panic set in, and I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to guide my way. The growling grew louder, closer. I had to keep moving. As I reached the 10th floor, the stairwell door burst open, and a figure lunged at me from the darkness. I dodged just in time, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had to keep going. Breathless and on the verge of collapse, I finally reached the ground floor. The exit was in sight. Freedom was within my grasp. But as I reached for the door, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned to see a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Desperation gave me strength, and I broke free from its grasp, throwing myself out of the building and into the night. The cold air filled my lungs, and I collapsed on the pavement, gasping for breath. I looked back at the building, its dark silhouette looming over me. The whispers were gone, the shadows no longer reaching for me. I had made it out, but I knew that the terror I had experienced would stay with me forever. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience in suspense, wondering if the protagonist will ever truly escape the horrors of the office building. Just when I thought I was free, the cold hand that had grasped my shoulder was more than a fleeting touch. It was a challenge. I turned around, my heart pounding, to face the shadowy figure in the dim light of the street lamp. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intent, piercing through the darkness. This was it, the source of all the terror. The main antagonist stood before me, its form shifting and twisting like a living nightmare. I had no choice but to confront it. The fear that had once paralyzed me now fueled my resolve. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of determination. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling with both fear and defiance. The figure's mouth twisted into a sinister smile, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed in my mind. "You cannot escape. You belong to us now." The air grew colder, and the shadows around us seemed to come alive, writhing and closing in. I took a step back, but there was no retreat. I had to fight. I had to end this. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged at the figure, my fists striking through the shadows. Each hit seemed to dissipate its form, but it was relentless, reforming and striking back with an inhuman strength. The battle was fierce, every moment a struggle for survival. I dodged and weaved, using the environment to my advantage. The street lamp flickered above us, casting an eerie glow on our confrontation. The figure's attacks were relentless, but I could see it weakening, its form becoming less stable. With a final, desperate effort, I grabbed a piece of broken metal from the ground and plunged it into the heart of the shadowy figure. It let out a piercing scream, its body convulsing and dissolving into a cloud of darkness. The shadows around us dissipated, and the cold air began to warm. I fell to my knees, exhausted but victorious. The main antagonist was gone, defeated. The nightmare was over. I looked back at the office building, its dark silhouette no longer looming with the same menacing presence. I had confronted my fears and emerged victorious, but the scars of this battle would remain with me forever. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience in awe of the protagonist's bravery and resilience, and wondering if they will ever find peace after such a harrowing ordeal. As the darkness dissipated and the cold air began to warm, I found myself kneeling on the ground, the weight of the night's events pressing heavily upon me. The once menacing office building now stood silent, its shadows no longer threatening, but still a stark reminder of the horrors I had faced. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the night air fill my lungs, and let my mind wander back through the labyrinth of terror I had navigated. Each scene played out vividly in my mind. The eerie silence, the flickering shadows, the whispers from the void, and the vanished employee. They were more than just frightening moments. They were pieces of a puzzle that had led me to this point. The blood-soaked blueprints had revealed the dark secrets hidden within those walls, and the 13th floor had shown me the true face of madness. I had been trapped, feeling the weight of hopelessness, and yet I had found a way to escape. The final revelation had given me the strength to confront the source of all the terror, and now it was over. As I stood up, the exhaustion washed over me, but so did a sense of accomplishment. I had faced my fears head-on and emerged victorious. But the victory came with a price. The scars of this battle, both physical and emotional, would remain with me forever. I walked away from the building, each step feeling heavier than the last. The world around me seemed different, quieter, almost as if it was holding its breath. I knew that I had changed. The person who had entered that building was not the same one who was leaving it. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with a sense of closure and reflection. The protagonist's bravery and resilience had seen them through the darkest of times, but the journey had left its mark. The story ends, not with a promise of peace, but with the understanding that some battles change us forever. The credits roll, accompanied by a somber, reflective melody, allowing the audience to process the emotional journey they have just witnessed.